Jimmy Savile, a man who conned the British public for years with a certain image of being a friendly, funny, bubbly guy, but really was a predator and would be properly exposed after his death. Let's get into the story right now where we'll explain everything about him. Savile worked in the coal mines as a teenager and reportedly sustained spinal injuries at the age of just 14. He was a Belgian boy during the Second World War and he began playing records in a dance hall, and he's said to have been the first disc jockey to use the twin turntables to keep music in constant play.
Until that point, I was doing dance halls and I invented the world's first double deck. And the people that made them, they said, "You don't need to, Jim, because these don't break down." And I said, but when this record is playing on this side, I'm getting the record ready for this side. And the fellow says, "My God, are they in that much of a hurry?" And I said, "Yes, my people are." And that's where the two decks came from. And now that's a worldwide phenomenon.
In his 20s, he was a professional wrestler.
Saturday afternoons was wrestling day on TV.
Everybody who had a television set, 4 o'clock, wrestling.
Him doing wrestling must have kept him in good shape because he actually continued doing marathons into his late 70s. His media career started as a disc jockey at a radio in 1958. He actually ended up getting a job at the BBC and he presented the first edition of Tops of the Pops in 1964, the broadcast on Radio 1 from 1968. From 1975 until 1994, he presented another show, Jim Will Fix It, and an early Saturday evening television program in which he arranged for the wishes of the viewers, mainly children, to come true. Now he was on live television, not just radio. We could see a glimpse of what he was actually like. At one point on live television, you can see him grabbing a woman and the sheer discomfort she was under as he kept grabbing her live on TV.
You see here, I'm trying to push his hand and he wouldn't move.
In her first broadcast interview, Sylvia Edwards told Sky News Jimmy Savile molested her on camera in the Top of the Pops studio.
And I just felt his hand go underneath, and that's what I said, I jumped up, but I went to go back down again because I couldn't go anywhere, and all of a sudden his hand was still there, so I was trying to push it away, but he wouldn't go. I mean, I just screeched. But I started feeling embarrassed because where can you go? I had all these people in front of me and I couldn't get down these step things. So I had to just stay there, but I was just trying to push it, and I was just getting really flustered.
Sylvia was 18 at the time. She says she told a man with a headset what had happened, but he said, "That's just Jimmy Savile."
The amount of times this guy just got stuff brushed off is crazy. That was a video, you can't hear him talking, but another time was captured with just audio, which I'll play that encounter now.
Who's your best pal, tell me?
I'm not telling you. No, Desmond.
He's not.
He is.
No, he's not.
Get off me.
Because he's a married man.
Don't care.
Yes, you do.
Get off.
I won't. Not
No,
until,
because you're squashing.
not until you say me.
Me.
So I promise
I promise.
that you, Jimmy Savile,
You, Jimmy Savile,
are the only one
are the only one.
in my life,
No, you're not the only one in my life.
and Noel Edmonds and all them others is definitely right. Ooh, girl, who's your best pal?
You as a pal, get off my backside.
Hey, I beg your pardon, in front of your mummy and daddy? Goodness gracious.
During Savile's lifetime, sporadic allegations of child abuse were made against him dating back to 1963. But these only came widely publicised after his death. Savile claimed the key to his success on Jimmy Will Fix It had been that he disliked children, although he had later admitted saying that he did it to deflect the scrutiny of his personal life. He did not own a computer, claiming he did not want anybody to think he was downloading child pornography. His autobiography, As It Happens 1974, reprinted as Love is an Uphill Thing in 1976, contains admissions of improper sexual conduct which appeared to have been passed unnoticed during his lifetime. Jimmy Savile did do a lot for charity, and that would put him in a very, very positive light in the public eye, and he even got noticed by the royal family for his deeds he was doing. It said he raised over 50 million across his career, but he had weird access to hospitals as well, where he could just walk in and there was vulnerable children, and many of them would report that he was doing stuff to them as well.
He started just coming in and plonking himself down and watching Top of the Pops with us on Lancaster Ward 1, which is where the incident happened. He was able to sit in front of the sofa on the floor and hide what he was doing, which he put his hand straight up my nightdress, and we weren't allowed to wear pants. So I was, unfortunately I could do nothing. I couldn't stop him, because Broadmoor staff would have punished me if I stood up and said what he was doing. They wouldn't have believed me, and they would have just punished me.
Jimmy Savile didn't have any trouble getting access to the high security unit. In fact, he had his very own special set of keys.
But I remember his keys were gold coloured and the staff's were just silver coloured. And it was like bowing and scraping to him as if he was some kind of god. But he was a DJ. What was he doing completely free in a top security mental hospital?
Jimmy Savile definitely knew how to use his fame to his advantage, and getting keys to a mental hospital was just one of the many things he was doing. But it was an easy target, because these people would seem crazy if they come out and said what Jimmy Savile was doing to them, and it would get even further punished for even talking that way about him.
Because if you want to catch paedophiles, and not just him, all of them, they're always enabled. 9 times out of 10 people know. And it's the people who sit in silence, they're as bad as he is. And the people that gave him the access, they knew. Not every individual knew, but those that did were turning a blind eye to creating victims. And I just get so mad that those people are still having their lives, drinking champagne, living good lives.
Very good point, that the people that was giving Jimmy Savile his access could be doing that to other people nowadays and just turning a blind eye. Maybe people just see this certain image that he was bubbly and he was friendly. Same with powerful people in the past like Jeffrey Epstein as well, how they can hold things over people and use power to their advantage. In a 1990 interview, The Independent on Sunday had asked Savile about rumours that he liked little girls. Savile's reply was that as he worked in the pop music business, the young girls in question don't gather around because of me, it's because I know the people they love, the stars. I am of no interest to them. Like I said, Jimmy Savile was this power figure that could lead people to the stars they actually liked. You see him earlier with that girl saying that she doesn't like Noel Edmonds, she likes him.
Your best pal, tell me.
No, Edmund.
He's not.
He is.
No, he's not.
Get off me.
Because he's a married man.
And that's the games he was playing with these little girls. It was actually sick. Oftentimes he was confronted on TV about the stuff in the press about him, and he would just say that it's all fake and you shouldn't believe
Don't you
newspapers.
see intellectual contradiction in your tabloid claim of having sex in a passion wagon and your profession to be a devout Roman Catholic?
Oh, you must put the camera on this man. This man is the only person I know in the world who believes newspapers.
Jimmy Savile also had another TV program in the 70s called Clunk Click, and there was allegations from a 14-year-old girl on that show also. Jimmy Savile's sex abuse scandal totaled 700 pages. It said that Savile had sexually abused 72 women and had raped 8 people. Jimmy Savile was found dead in his home on the 29th of October 2011, 2 days before his 85th birthday. He'd been in hospital before that and his death was not suspicious. His closed satin gold coffin was displayed at Queen's Hotel in Leeds with his last cigar he smoked and 2 of his This Is Your Life books. Around 4,000 people visited to pay tribute. His funeral took place in Leeds Cathedral on the 9th of November 2011 and he was buried at Woodland Cemetery, and he was specifically in his will that his coffin was inclined 45 degrees to fulfill his wish to see the sea. The coffin was encased in concrete as a security measure. An auction of Savile's possessions was conducted in Leeds on the 30th of July 2012, with the proceeds going to charity. His silver Rolls-Royce convertible was sold for $130,000 to an internet bidder. The vehicle's number plate JS247 featured the original medium wave wavelength used by BBC Radio 1, 247 meters. Almost a year after his passing, on the 19th of October 2012, the Metropolitan Police launched a formal criminal investigation into the historic allegations against Jimmy Savile. But Jimmy Savile was no longer here. He had passed away. So people targeted stuff like his former house, graffitiing all over it, when the truth come out about what Jimmy Savile had done to many women across the years. Long before his death, he spoke about death. In this 3-minute clip I'm going to play now, he spoke about how he thinks he's going to go to hell and his mother's going to go to heaven. It's like he knew he had it coming. It's just a shame that he didn't get confronted with everything when he was here to his face. It was all after his passing.
What are you most proud of? You've done so many things in your life. Aside from your charity stuff, actually, because that's the most honourable thing you do, and you do it so brilliantly. I don't think there's anybody in show business raises more money and gives more money away than yourself. Professionally, what are you most proud of?
Waking up this morning. Simple, sensible, honest. But I think that waking up this morning was one of the star parts of my life. And this morning I woke up, let me think, I was on my own. And that is tremendous.
How often do you wake up in the morning and have to check to see whether there is somebody on the other side?
Well, not very often, because what happens, I'm a pushover, and if somebody comes and knocks on the door and says, I've lost my keys to go in, I'll say, step this way. And they say, I thought you'd say that. It's not my fault. I can't help it. I'm a single fella.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. You haven't broken any laws, have you?
None whatsoever. And if I do, well, I'll stand for that as well.
You talk about waking up in the morning. What about not waking up in the morning and being back with your mum? Do you think about that?
No, she'll have gone to heaven. I mean, I've lost my life a few times, one way and another, believe me. But I'm not quite sure. The religious department at BBC once asked me if I'd write a book. So I said, yes, all right then. So I wrote a book, and the fence today, but we called the book God'll Fix It, right? And it sold for over nearly 40 years through Mowbray's, the religious publishers. And it's an odd book, but very palatable, which is why it sold for all those years. And the last page is that question that you just asked me about not waking up. And if I arrive at the gates of heaven and St. Peter says, you've been a very tricky man, you can't come in here, I'll break his thumbs. Because I'm qualified to do that, because I earn a living being a wrestler. And I've never had a problem yet with anybody whose thumbs I've broke.
You talk about that, though, as if there's reasons for you going downstairs. Do you have a conscience about that? Is there stuff you've done that you think will deny you access to the big man?
No. I never brought any harm to anybody. I've never bad-mouthed anybody. It sounds a bit yucky, but it's my nature, it's my lifestyle, and I never thought there was a profit in being bad. There might be a profit for a few days, a few weeks, even a few years. But sooner or later you get your comeuppance. And so the best thing to do, I mean, I know a million bad people. I know them, but I've no desire to be one, only because it's not my nature. If it's not your nature, then you're not, holier than thou or gooder than thou. It's just not your nature, full stop.
How on earth did Jimmy Savile get away with 54 years of abusing different women? One of the main things is the way the police dealt with the case, which was explained well on television. There was a lack of enthusiasm to go ahead with prosecuting him or building a case amongst several women. It just kept getting pushed to the side.
They'd failed these victims in the following ways.
Surrey police decided not to tell each complainant that other complaints had been made.
That's important because the victims went on to say they would have supported a prosecution if they knew they weren't alone.
Sussex police told the complainant that corroboration would be needed.
According to the CPS, there was no legal basis for this. Of course, cooperation would have helped, but it wasn't necessary to progress the case. The report also criticises the role of the Crown Prosecution Service itself. It says,
the CPS prosecutor, when told by police that the complainants did not support the prosecution, did not probe this or seek to build a prosecution.
Miss Levitt QC went on to conclude,
had the police and prosecutors taken a different approach, a prosecution might have been possible.
The CPS, Crown Prosecution Service, who deal with stuff like this, apologised of how they dealt with the case. It's like Jimmy Savile was sort of invincible at that time and could do what he wants and didn't care. A detective actually failed to submit an intelligence report about Jimmy Savile and an ex-mayor after allegations were made against him, a report has found. She told how at age 16 she went into Savile's flat with a 15-year-old friend and there was sexual contact. The detective claimed the woman eventually told him that her friend would not make a complaint and refused to tell him any more about her. The woman met with the officer after Savile's death and she told him that she had lied about the details of the incident in 2002. She said to the detective that she had actually been alone with the presenter and she had been underage. In the statement, the officer said, I asked her if she now wanted to make a formal complaint about what happened with Savile and she refused to. Police were just part of this parade, but there was scaremongering people out of actually going ahead with the allegations. Before they'd know it, they'd make a complaint and then literally just disregard it later. After his passing by 11th of October 2012, allegations had been made against Savile to 13 British police forces, which led to setting up of inquiries into practices at the BBC and within the National Health Service. The Met stated the total number of alleged victims was 589, of whom 450 alleged abuse from Savile. Main thing for all the victims is that he passed away and they didn't want that to happen. They wanted to see him go through the punishment of going through court, facing every single person that he abused face to face, and he got the easy way out of passing away. But he did actually respond to some claims when the police interviewed him one time about the abuse he had put towards women.
As we've been hearing, Surrey Police have released a transcript of an interview with the broadcaster Jimmy Savile. It was conducted in Savile's own office at Stoke Mandeville Hospital in 2009 when he was 83 years old.
This little transcript is going to be read out of the police interview of what exactly happened. Was only 2 years before his passing, which was good because this is after all the victims that he had gone through and when he was of old age. So let's see how he conducted this interview.
In this, he repeatedly denies claims of sexual abuse and said they came from people who, in his words, were looking for a few quid or a story for the paper. Alan Collins is a solicitor at the firm of Panone, which represents 60 victims of Savile. I asked Alan Collins what he thinks the newly released transcript tells us.
It's sadly a missed opportunity because the interview, in my opinion, was Savile-led and not police-led.
The thing about people like Jimmy Savile is they know how to speak to certain people. They know how to deal with police officers, they know how to deal with professional people and what the right things are to say to lead them off the course. The police didn't do well at all in finding out anything about Jimmy Savile, even when speaking to him directly.
It was an opportunity for the police really to challenge Savile over these allegations, and given what we know and what the police should have appreciated at the time.
I mean, this at the time was October 2009. Are you saying they had more information?
Yeah, I think there's enough now in the public domain to enable us to say the dots weren't joined up, because we have to remember that Savile came onto the police's radar way back in the 1960s.
The 1960s. It's just crazy to think that hundreds and hundreds of victims across 50 years and this man was off the police's radar to a certain extent. They probably knew a few officers, but the people high up must have been brushing it under the carpet.
And so this wasn't really something new, and I think we've got two issues. Number one, the failure of the police to join up the dots, because had they joined up the dots they would have realised that there were several sets of allegations in relation to Savile, and he needed to be interviewed and challenged about those allegations. And then secondly, the fact is the way this particular interview was conducted, Savile was interviewed apparently at his office at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. That's extraordinary in its own right. And he was able to manipulate the interview.
But then he wasn't a suspect, was he? I mean, he was somebody who was out there in public, and the police will quite often come to you. They don't necessarily require you to go to them.
Well, that is true, but given the nature of the allegation and the general circumstances, I have to say this wasn't just really, witnessing a crime. This was someone who was being accused of a very serious crime.
One thing for the police at this time is they didn't know how to deal with celebrities, and they seemed so powerful. This guy literally had a medal for his work in charity from higher up parts of the royal family, and to arrest him and for it to make the papers, if it's in any way a mistake, they would be receiving huge punishment at their job. But there should have been at least one person to connect the dots and have kids or something and be like, this isn't right and doesn't make sense. Maybe them people, like I said, were just brushed under the carpet and told to be quiet for talking about it.
And so the whole setup strikes me as odd, and really it should not have justified him being able to dictate the pace, as it were, by saying, I'm going to be interviewed at my office at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. And even if we say, for argument's sake, accept it was okay to interview him there, the meat is in the substance of the actual interview itself. The fact that Savile was not really challenged about his denials, about what he had to say as regards the allegation. A serious allegation was made.
A serious allegation of sexual touching and forced oral sex, yes.
Yeah, of a young, vulnerable person. And to get away with saying, oh, well, people are after my money and I'm famous and so on and I have friends in high places.
It's another good point, is that the newspapers were popping back in the day with people coming after celebrities, and nowadays anyone could sell a story to the paper, but back then they was more picky of who they went for just because of the backlash they would get from certain companies. But now there's so much competition within the media industry, they'll expose anyone.
Well, if Savile was going to take that line, he should have been challenged about that, because it was totally irrelevant, and that was just Savile throwing his weight around, as he had always done.
Was, we know with retrospect, that was just Savile. This is the way that he treated these people. Charges throughout the years.
That's right. He was a bully. He was able to inveigle situations and which enabled him to abuse young people, vulnerable people. He would effectively bully people, and that's how he got his way and got away with serious offences year after year, decade after decade. And so this was just Savile being able to manipulate the situation once again to his own ends.
An example of his manipulative behaviour and how quick-witted he was about certain situations was a clip I played earlier, his response to that boy questioning his religious beliefs.
It was hosted by a young Christian Guru Murphy.
Remind me of the subject matter. I thought it was a fun thing, but never mind.
A panel of teenagers asked him the questions then that, if we could, everyone wants to ask him now.
Jimmy, you've never been married and you don't seem to have a very high regard of women. Oh. Do you feel that women are inferior to you, or are you frightened from them?
Don't you see an intellectual contradiction in your tabloid claim of having sex in a passion wagon and your profession to be a devout Roman Catholic?
Oh, you must put the camera on this man. This man is the only person I know in the world who believes newspapers.
This is just a little example of how he can make people look stupid who question him. Just quick-witted responses, and again using that excuse of don't believe what you see in the newspapers is something he would say.
When he could have asked for a lawyer, he didn't. That showed great confidence, didn't it? Because would most people in those circumstances have wanted to have a lawyer present?
Can't say every case is different, but it ties in with Savile's state of mind, the way he viewed himself, the way he viewed his victims. He saw himself apart. He saw himself as someone who was virtually untouchable. And remember, you know, through his life, he'd gone through accumulating very powerful acquaintances and friends, as he saw it. And that was just Savile being his usual confident self.
We know now that the Home Secretary has extended the inquiry, and he's looking at 10 other hospital trusts other than Broadmoor and Stoke Mandeville and Leeds. Does that in itself suggest to you that there is even more to be discovered about this extraordinary and complicated and dreadful man?
Jimmy Savile's case is crazy because a lot of people spoke out, but a lot of people would save themselves the embarrassment of the whole situation and wouldn't want to talk about it at all. So there could be even hundreds, if not thousands, of victims that haven't come out and said what Jimmy Savile did to them. Or maybe they was even too young to even remember. But stuff like that does stick with you. But Jimmy Savile was a sly.
Sadly, I suspect yes. From what I know from listening to victims and witnesses, Savile used whatever opportunity came his way to serve his own selfish ends, and that was to abuse young and vulnerable people. He used his charity work as a very effective way of gaining access to vulnerable people, schools, hospitals and so on. So it's not at all surprising if over his 50 years of offending that he would have committed offences in a wide variety of situations and places.
And does it help your clients, Mr. Collins, that these things keep on coming out, layer upon layer?
Yes and no. It's a constant reminder which is very painful. It stokes up very painful memories. But at the same time, I think the victims want to know the truth. They need to understand how Savile was able to get away with his offending year in, year out, decade after decade, and who knew what he was getting up to.
Alan Collins, who represents 60 of Jimmy Savile's victims.
Jimmy Savile was definitely good at portraying himself as a people's person. Literally paying attention to everyone and fitting in amongst kids and adults, and even with the highest people, politicians to prime ministers. He definitely created a world for himself where he could get away with whatever he wants, and however we look at it, he pretty much did. There was no evidence or anything to prosecute him at the time that was collected together. Everything was waited until he'd passed away, then the police came at him. This guy was often seen going into the highest parts of the British government and being greeted by everyone. They all said, "Hello Jimmy, hey Jimmy, how is it doing?" as he walked in, and everyone loved him, and he come under the spell of this fake illusion that he was a good person. Oftentimes in interviews you see a glimpse of his true character, one time even saying he don't follow rules.
Portray him as he wanted and he'd get away with anything.
Hospitals have rules with patients and things like that. Well, because I'm dyslexic when I want to be, I don't understand rules. And
Phil Hornby for Meridian Tonight.
As you know, in the early days she had attraction.
This guy ruined many girls' lives, and there was many victims of him, and the only thing they got was some compensation. We're getting to that court case. Court of Appeal did upheld a compensation scheme set up for the scores of women who said they were sexually abused by Jimmy Savile, paving the way for claims to continue. The 3 appeal judges heard the case after a charity, which is the major beneficiary of Savile's estate, raised concerns about the plan at a hearing last month. Lawyers representing the Jimmy Savile Charitable Trust said the scheme agreed between the estate, executor and the NatWest Bank, and lawyers representing alleged victims did not assess the validity of the claims and lacked a process of evaluation. By October, NatWest had processed 68 claims, and a further 131 remain to be considered. Of the 68 claims, 11 have been accepted at a total value of $353,125, including costs. A further 11 claimants have been offered reduced settlements amounting to $303,500, and 36 claims in the value of $1.14 million have been rejected, and a further information has been requested in the remaining 10. The value of the 131 remaining claims is about $2.27 million. The scheme contains a list of 8 categories of assault ranging from rape to indecent assault involving touching over clothing, and provides a tariff rate of damages for each category. The scheme is also provided for the existing claimants who claims are agreed to receive $10,000 for their cost to approve of this scheme for further costs for all alleged claims, to be paid in fixed amounts varying from $6,000 to $3,500 depending on whether the psychiatric report was obtained and by whom. Jimmy Savile was worth around £4 million when he died, and a law firm claimed $1.8 million for work for NatWest Bank. Lawyers for the claimants will be $689,000, and $1 million agreed for the 78 cases of abuse made solely against the estate. A couple of £1 million and hundreds of victims, they're barely going to get anything compared to what they deserve or what they had to suffer off of Jimmy Savile. That's it for this video, guys. If you are new to this channel, we got a lot more content coming like this. Make sure you smash that subscribe button. Have a nice day. Leave a like as well on the video. See you on the next one. Peace out.